Check, check.
What a lovely looking group of people. I like you, Toronto.
So we want to start off by getting a little show of hands. Who here? Raise your hand if you've beaten Cuphead.
Woo! Yes.
Nice. Okay, raise your hand if you've beaten it on expert mode. Oh.
Not bad.
Okay, raise your hand if you've gotten all the achievements. Nice, nice. I'm impressed. So my name is Jordan. This is Brett. We're both
Hey, guys.
we're both with Destructoid, a video game website, and today we are talking to two of the minds behind Cuphead.
Hi, I am Maya Moldenhauer. I am an executive producer with Studio MDHR and one of the artists. And
I'm Chad Moldenhauer, one of the co-creators and art director on Cuphead.
So we've got a lot to get to today because we want to know a lot of stuff. It seems like the logical place to begin is with the origin of Cuphead. It seems like there's a lot of misconceptions out there about the actual timeline when you guys started Cuphead. Like everyone's kind of heard that's been in development since 2010. What's the actual story about the game?
well, it's been in development since 1999. No, I'm kidding. That is a great question to ask because let's clear the air here. Actually, I'll let you clear the air on this one.
Yeah, I know this timeline nearly perfect. Jared and I, like my brother Jared and I, started talking about making a game maybe in 2010, and that's how that idea of Cuphead has been made since 2010 started. But we didn't actually start prototyping a run and gun game until 2013, and that was still on the weekends, very part-time, maybe 3 or 4 hours a week. It didn't really start until the end of 2014. And that's kind of when our team grew to about 6. And then after E3 2015 is when we decided to make the leap and go all in for this game. And we hired a bunch more people, scaled the team up to around 16, and that's realistically mid-2015 is when development started.
Was it, so you said run and gun, was it always going to be a run and gun, or was there a point where it was looking like something else, or could it maybe been something else?
We always have wanted to make a run and gun since probably 12 years old, and throughout our life we've been passing ideas back and forth on, here's cool ideas we could add if we ever got to make our own game. So when it came to the final decision of like, what game should we make, it was like, hell yeah, let's make this.
I take it there were specific games then at that age that you really loved, that you wanted to continue. Were there some?
Oh, for sure. Contra 3, Gunstar Heroes are like our main inspiration. And then Treasure as a whole, all their library of games is amazing, and we loved like the early Japanese style of development that kind of paved the way for the crazier yet still friendly style of games.
Was your original vision for Cuphead like the 1930s animation style? Was that set from the get-go?
I'd say gameplay was set from the get-go and style of game, so obviously like the run and gun platformer. But the art style actually came secondary, and it was many, many different iterations, a ton of different sketchbooks, page to page, back and front, and different concepts, different characters, different eras, aesthetics, and things like that. Except when we finally sat down to say, okay, if we're going to be working on this as a passion project and putting in an infinite amount of hours, let's do something that we love. We loved the cartoons from that era. And so we did a bit of prototyping, and it stuck. And after we saw it for the first time, we couldn't unsee it. It was just, that was it.
I'll interject that before we landed on that, we were scared at the idea of trying to replicate the 30s style just due to the sheer volume of work.
Pretty ambitious, to be honest, yeah.
So there was a few ideas. We tried to replicate a style with early concept art from Final Fantasy VII, if anybody knows the colored pencil stuff. And we got down a path too where Jared had this idea where the game could start in school, like elementary school, so the art would progress as you made your way through the game. So it'd start with crayons and early, we had a prototype of a hand turkey, like a hand paint style turkey, that eventually evolved into the slime boss, if you can believe that. And it kind of went up into grade 8, which that was our original cool idea. But once we landed on the 30s look, then the rest is history.
So while we're talking about aesthetics, I remember E3, was it 2014 when it was first revealed?
Like the little 3-second blip?
Yeah,
2014.
People were stoked on it. I remember how it was part of like that indie sizzle reel, and people were like, "Wait, what the hell was that? I want to know about that."
Yeah, we were at home in our basement watching that. We still sit there today. We were watching that, and we were watching the chat, and it was just wild how many people responded to that 3-second clip. It was crazy.
What did that do to your spirits?
It just blew our minds.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things at the time was we were seeing a ton of comments of people thinking that this was just a cutscene. There's no way a game can look like this. And since we knew it was already running and we were playing it, that was like a funny inside joke to us. But it helped cement the idea that we can make a game that we love without a bunch of research and worrying about what the market can handle, and still, reach an audience. I think that's like one of the major key points.
Also, at that point, was it kind of like the pressure's on? The expectations are high, or were you feeling that yet, or did you ever feel that?
We did, I think, but not at that moment. I think it was closer to the end when it's human nature, I think, to be so close to something and then being like, oh my God, what if we let people down with this? But on the other hand, we were at exhibits and conferences and shows, and we had a playable demo there, and people were responding really well to it. So those demos were real in-game gameplay and stuff. So it's not like we were, just showing a trailer and being like, yeah, this is in-game, but really it wasn't. So yeah, Chad doesn't get anxious over anything.
Jared and I both the whole time, I think we knew that this is the game we want to make, and we're not really going to sway on that. So there was a little bit of pressure to kind of live up to, I guess, the amount of content that maybe people were thinking about. But other than that, we were just like, we're going to remain tunnel vision for what we want to do for the overall game.
Yeah, and I think it's also important on that note as well that we never went into this with the expectation of selling so many different units and hitting these markets and having this merch and stuff like that. It was never about that, so I think that helped alleviate a lot of pressure as well. It was just simply to make a game that we love for gaming's sake. And so it just kind of...
And that shows in the game. I mean, it's a great game. I think everyone would agree.
So that's kind of a segue into the next question I had. A lot of people have seen Indie Game the movie, and we got to see like the Super Meat Boy team walk through like the 24 hours around the launch of their game. What was it like for you guys? Like, did you sleep? Were you nervous, or was it?
I don't think we slept that night, did we?
Well, there's a kind of a interesting story.
I think you're going to tell it.
Microsoft wanted us to come out for a launch party, and this was like the day after?
No, the day of
the day of the launch.
That night.
And we were in the airport launching the game on Steam.
On Wi-Fi, like the airport
Yeah.
Wi-Fi.
So that's how the last days looked. There was just a ton of like achievement visuals and other non-core gameplay visuals that can come right at the end. And because we were cramming a ton of content right up to the last minute, that just kind of made sure our workload was 19 hours every day until after launch.
And I mean, on Xbox, obviously their process is a lot more involved and like a ton of QA and certification. So we had passed certification well before that 24-hour period, and it was there and it was logged and ready to launch. So there wasn't much we had to do on that end.
Oh yeah, I guess I'm forgetting. This is the Steam, because Steam doesn't really have any certification, so you can kind of launch whenever you want.
Whatever you want, yeah. But Microsoft's a lot more of a Yeah.
We know that Steam doesn't have much certification.
Yeah, we know. What was the morale like for the team? Like you were telling us before the panel that you guys are remote and your team's remote. What was morale like?
I think everyone was super pumped. So I'm not sure if anyone knows, but Studio MDHR, the MDHR stands for Moldenhauer, and it's because our executive, I laugh at that term, but
I'm not an executive.
the main kind of core team were all Moldenhauers, just cousins, brothers, sisters, and stuff like that. And so we're all family, but our extended team still felt like immediate family. Like there was it wasn't difficult to get the team to come together, and unify over the launch. We were all sitting, half of us were sitting in an airport together waiting to catch our flight to LA, and it was just, it was so much fun.
You're missing out on the main point that I think it was about 40% of our team we had never met in person before until launch day.
Yeah. So it can be done. You don't need a big office.
So, as predicted, everything was super stressful around launch. You released in late September, I believe, right?
Yep, September 29th.
So that makes October, November, December, January. So 5 months after. What's it like now? Like, has it slowed down? Is it still hectic? What are you feeling?
We're still recovering.
Yeah, I would say it's just recently slowed down. We have met some amazing people in the industry and have some really close colleagues and stuff that are even in the GTA that we asked them, like, what is it like post-launch? When am I going to be able to take a vacation? It's been 5 years. And their advice to us was like, do not take a vacation for the first 3 months post-launch. And I was like, you're crazy. That was really good advice, because it's been a ton of press. It's been a lot of different shows. Like there was DICE recently. We've got GDC coming up, things like that. But it's just starting to slow down and normalize a little bit. And we're just really eager to kind of bury our heads in the sand again and get going.
Get back into it.
Yeah.
And I think one of the main things is the shift between creating the game and launching the game. I'm a firm believer in it's the journey that really counts. So it's a feeling of like we really want to get back to making games, because when you launch a game, there is at least our entire team had no big, huge moment or it was this amazing thing. It's awesome to launch a game, but the working on it the entire time was much more fun than actually just launching it.
Yeah, I would say some of the people on our team have even said that there was this lull, like they're just like, what do you mean my work is done? Like, what do you mean it's over? And we're like, that was the last frame, or that was the last line of code, or it's done. And it was a bit of a shock, especially when you're in a sprint for so long.
That can be a tricky part of just the games industry, is that transitional period for, especially if you, even with a small team like yours, like bigger teams especially, but making sure someone always has something to do.
I know, exactly. So because we were so small, and this was our first game, I know some companies usually have multiple games in parallel, so that ends and you're already in the meat and thick of something else. But for us, we didn't know if this what was going to happen, so we're like, let's just do it one game at a time for right now.
So I think now that we kind of got a little overview of just the timeline, I think now we want to dive into some of the like design choices and that sort of talk. One of the big points is its difficulty. This is a challenging game in a good way, but what went into tuning and balancing Cuphead and making it feel right? Was there a specific point where you felt this feels right? We're really onto something.
That's more of Jared's side. So we both cross on major art decisions or major gameplay decisions, but he is usually leading the gameplay side. Since we both know exactly the kind of game that we wanted, we kind of modeled it after some of our favorites, with of course tweaks and revisions along the way. And the pirate boss was the first actual prototype that was like near flawless in our mind. And when we started playing that, it was just like we knew right then we had something, but only because we loved it. This is not testing it with anybody else. We just knew we wanted to keep making this game based on that one thing.
Oh, so it was almost like this is a blueprint of what this game can be, and if we can keep like evolving it, or we can match this going forward, we'll have something great.
Exactly.
Yes, for sure. And the difficulty comes from we grew up in the mid to late 80s and even into the early 90s, and there was really no such thing as a hard game.
They were all
Just-
hard.
they were all hard.
brutal.
You had to pay $70 for a game that was maybe 40 minutes long, so the developers made sure that they were super hard. But we didn't see it that way when we were growing up. It was just that's how the game played. So it's only because of our history is the reason that Cuphead's this hard. And I use hard in quotations because it's not intentionally hard. It's just the style of game we wanted to make.
I'm always super interested in like user trends, and we did our cute little thing at the beginning. Where we're like, how far did everyone get? Do you have any metrics about how far the average player did get? Because I obviously like fell in love with it, and I beat it all the way through about as well as I could. And I have some friends who bought it, and they beat like 2 bosses, and they're like, no, I need after work to be less stressful than this. I'm just curious, like, what % saw the whole game through? Who couldn't hack it? Do you know anything about that?
I remember some of the numbers off the top of my head, and this is only based on Steam Global Achievements.
Okay.
56% of people beat the first world, like Inkwell Isle 1. And I think it drops to about 33% for Inkwell Isle 2. And I think beating Inkwell Isle 3 is around the 16%. And beating the game, I'm pretty sure it's around 9 or 10%, something like that. But you have to remember that a lot of this stuff is skewed because a ton of people don't really like to play a game through and through. There's a few key games that they love playing, but they also like the idea of experiencing a bunch of other games, so they don't go into every game in the library with the intention of beating it.
That's true. I mean, even really easy games, the completion rates can be surprisingly
Yes.
low, like very, very low.
So I reviewed the game for Destructoid. I gave it a 9.5, very good score. One of my only complaints was how weird the default controls were.
Were they felt right to you, or were they?
Again,
It
this is
was what
this
you
is
wanted?
mid to late 80s.
So
Feel.
you want
it-
it to feel like an SNES gamepad
Oh, for sure.
instead of using triggers and bumpers.
Yes.
There's the answer to my question.
Like we would when we showed the game at trade shows, people would come up to us and be like, "How come jump isn't on the left trigger?" And to us, we're like, "What are you talking about?" When we play a retro game, it's set up on like Super NES or
Yeah,
Genesis or any one of those. So
Yeah, I got yelled at by a guy in Germany one time in German, and then somebody was like, "This is what he's saying," and I was like, he was just yelling at like, "Why?" And just kept putting the controller in my face, and I'm like, "Oh my god."
sorry to anyone who doesn't like the default controls.
Well, the important part is that you can switch them to
Exactly.
your preference.
Exactly.
So,
Actually, I wanted to know this. I'm going to ask this question. Can you explain your stance about keeping people who play the game on simple mode from seeing the end game content? Because it seems like there were a lot of passionate feelings on both sides of the argument right after launch happened.
Again, this comes from our childhood. A lot of, at least in our mind, a lot of the good games that we played growing up would close off certain things. The easy mode was sometimes called practice. A standout is Castle of Illusion on Genesis. You could play on practice mode. It would let you, try 6 or 7 out of the, I think, 14 levels. And then you'd get a different ending. And we like the idea that in gaming, at least in this style of retro game, it feels like you've completed something if you have to give it your full effort. So the choice to gate the people who only played on easy, in our minds, was like a pretty easy
you wanted
choice.
people to earn it.
Yes, because when the people did earn it, it would feel much better than if anybody could just play it on simple mode and beat the whole game and say, "Oh yeah, I beat it."
I want to hear about some surprises. For example, were there any bosses that people thought were easier than expected, harder than expected? Was there anything like that? For me personally, like I cannot do the shoot 'em up sections that well. Like the robot in the junkyard is the hardest boss for me by a large margin. I'm so bad at that one.
I hear a lot about Jimmy, good old Jimmy, the genie. People don't like him a lot.
I don't either. He's like the second hardest for me.
I think Grim Matchstick, like the dragons,
Yeah.
was a standout for what we played it so much. And our
That's like
peers
one of my
played it so
favorite
much.
ones. That's my favorite, maybe. Yeah.
But everybody we showed, and all of our peers, and even people who hadn't played games, really didn't have any problems with it. So in our mind, we were like, this is an Inkwell Isle 2 boss, no problem. But when we launched the game, we're like, oh God, it's a little harder than we thought.
What's the cutting room floor look like for Cuphead? Are there any designs or ideas that you're bummed that you just couldn't, implement?
When you are as small of a team as we are, with as little money that we had, there is very little that makes it on the cutting room floor. Like, there's very little to no waste. And I think it's also because there weren't, 100 people teams working in parallel that you couldn't have eyes on something and it kept going, and then you decided, oh no, it's not good enough. We had eyes on everything that was happening at every given time, and the minute it wasn't following the vision, we would either end it before it got far at all, or adjust things. Very little on the cutting room floor.
The main thing, if anybody has searched that for all of the data that has been mined on Cuphead,
Yeah, that's a good point.
there's a bunch of kind of prototype junky bosses, and there's even a boss that is a bit more fleshed out. And they weren't cut because we didn't have enough time. Those were cut early on because they just didn't fit in the style. And a lot of that figuring out bosses for the King Dice battle wasn't just, hey, we know that there's going to be these 9 mini bosses. We made, I can't remember what it was, I think there was 16 or 17. And they went through iterations. And when you get to a certain point on some ideas where you hit whatever, iterations 5 or 6, and it still isn't working, so you just cut it. But from our grand vision, there wasn't much cut, as we kept going.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you really had a kind of a game plan, and you knew what you were wanting to make all along once you got into it, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
There were some parts where we were scared that we weren't going to be able to have enough time to squeeze it in, but we all somehow
I don't know how we did
pulled
that.
through near the end.
At the end, yeah.
I mean, and that's also something to bring up, is just that part of production is it can be a grind. Like, how do you get around that crunch, and how do you tackle that?
When you're in the thick of it and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you've been up since 6 o'clock in the morning and you've been going all day, we truly are so passionate about this game and what we did and the art and the gameplay and games in general that it didn't feel like work ever, really.
That's one of the biggest reasons.
Yeah, it's just we love it so much. In hindsight, I'm looking at these banker boxes full of animation paper, and I'm like, how did we pull that off? What just happened? And it's just kind of a blur now. But
I will say that even though we're super passionate about it, we're not massive fans of crunch. So I think it's just part and parcel to being a smaller team. We don't have money to just hire, triple the team size to make sure that everybody can only work, the normal amount of hours. So I think it comes with starting any business. There's going to be a point where you're going to have to put a lot of hours and hard work in if you want to finish a great project or product.
You guys are relatively new as a studio, and for your first project, you knocked it out of the ballpark.
Thank you.
What did you learn doing this? What advice do you have for aspiring developers? I'm sure there's probably some developers in the crowd right now. What do you say to people to impart your wisdom?
one of the things I would say, and it's because it's a common theme that I'm seeing in a lot of press and articles and things like that I've read throughout the past year or so. People like to romance the idea that Studio MDHR quit their day jobs, remortgaged their homes, and went all in. And in theory, yeah, okay, we did those things, but it was in increments. We took baby steps. There were checks and balances along the way. We would not have done that back in 2014, but we saw the reception after that 3-second clip. The next year, we were on stage at E3, and the fan base just grew that much more. So we're like, okay, let's quit our jobs and kind of go in on this. It grew a little bit more. We remortgaged our homes. Like there were these pulse checks to say we're on the right path. This isn't just a niche following or a niche group of people that we had intended it to be for before we took the next steps. So I would strongly probably discourage anyone quit their day jobs and remortgage their home in one day. And yeah, just make sure that, and have a clear vision. That's the other thing. The number of times that we heard, it's too hard, guys, like it's way too hard, you gotta scale it back if you're gonna market this to a greater group, and after the second or third word, it would just start blurring in our minds because we just knew exactly what we wanted, and we were going to have that, and we were gonna make that, and nothing anybody said was gonna distract us.
Yeah, and I think the things that people don't see from the outside is that a good rule is that everybody's probably heard a bunch of times is make a lot of small games and finish those
Just
games.
don't start on too big of a project, too ambitious.
And from the outside, Cuphead looks like you started one massive game, which is true. But when we started, we were doing small prototypes, and you could almost consider those prototypes separate games. So we would finish a prototype and kind of finalize the gameplay and see what we liked, and we scrapped that, but chose a couple of the options that were feeling right and take it to the next prototype. So even though we only worked on one game, it was like we worked on 10 games while we were initially developing Cuphead. And I guess the biggest pro tip is to be like everybody who's in the games industry or wants to get into the games industry should play a ton of games. And you shouldn't restrict yourself to just the most modern or even the top rated games. It makes a lot of sense to play complete garbage games so you understand what good is. Because if you only play good games, you never have it never clicks in of why certain things work and certain things don't work. So go back and play a bunch of really sloppy games.
Were there any specific takeaways? You don't have to name names for games. I won't put the pressure on you, but were there any specific takeaways of like, we're not gonna mess this up, we're gonna do this part right?
This one's easy. We knew from playing games back in the day that all of the good ones played at 60 frames a second, and that was almost a mainstay. Back in the past, people didn't want to half the frame rate to get better graphics. It was always, how can we achieve 60 frames a second, because that's a much tighter game. And I know there are certain games that play okay at 30, but deep down we still had that it has to be 60. So there's a bunch of games in the past that you can look through the NES or Genesis library. Like anybody knows what Awesome Possum is. I think it runs at about 25 frames a second at the highest. So there's a bunch of shoddy, and who knows, they could have been rushed, or they could have had other pressures, but there's a bunch of games that people probably focused on the wrong areas, and maybe focus tested stuff instead of worrying about core gameplay is almost the most important experience, especially if you're making an action-based game.
So this kind of piggybacks off the advice for other people. What advice do you have for yourself on your next game? Like, what's going to be easier for you now that you've already done this once?
That's hard, because
Yeah.
during development, we were trying to one-up everything. Like all the ideas we thought of, we always wanted to push it into the craziest direction. Like from the gameplay to the art, like the rain effects on Grim Matchsticks levels.
Do you know that there are 6,000 individually drawn raindrops on Grim Matchsticks Storm Phase that he wouldn't let us reuse? He was like, no. In Little Mermaid, every bubble is unique.
Which is true.
Like,
It's funny that you knew that, by the way.
Well, yeah, like the art director on Little Mermaid, I can't remember who came to him and said, there's technology now, we can replicate the bubbles and reuse stuff, and he was strong fast on never. Everything has to be hand-drawn. So I kept that rule on 95% of the game. When bosses have dust effects when their feet hit the ground, or sparks when stuff come off of them, it's all original and like catered towards that boss. So we kind of went crazy, So now when we get into like making the next projects, we're going to try to one-up ourselves again, that's why it's like, I don't know if we've learned any great lessons because we're going to go down the same hell path again.
I would say just a lot of the painful things. So when we first started, we had this makeshift scanner. We aren't classically trained in animation, and we just had to kind of figure things out on our own on the fly, watching YouTube videos. And like we made this makeshift 3-peg scanner with electrical tape and things like that. And then halfway through, you realized, oh, there are things made to scan animations in, and we don't have to be doing things like that. So some things like that, but I don't think in terms of difficulty from production-wise, he's going to slow down at all.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. From our production pipeline is pretty clean now because it was just, we learned along the way and it was pretty haggard when we started, and now it's quite streamlined. But the actual work that goes into the game is probably going to get much worse, so it's a double-edged sword.
Well, we're looking forward to it because that means it'll probably be another great game then if you're putting in that energy and that,
It's
that
pretty
focus.
beautiful.
And yeah. So before we get to a Q&A, we just have a few questions we pulled from the Destructoid community, our readers. One user wanted to know how many hours you spent watching old cartoons just in like research and getting the atmosphere right for Cuphead.
At one point, I think I was doing close to 2 hours a day, like maybe for 7 months straight.
Yeah, I was going to say for about half a year.
Just
At least, yeah, because we were working during the day, and so it would be at nighttime that we'd be able to watch these and rewatch them.
one of the main things, like from this, watching cartoons all the time, one of the main things as we developed the game is I didn't want us to have anything in the game that seemed like it didn't fit in the era. So if an animator was working on a boss that threw a hammer, they would say, hey, this hammer looks really cool. But then I would go and research and look at how hammers were drawn in cartoons, how they were drawn in annual reports or posters in the era, just to make sure we weren't bringing anything modern or too old into it. So there was a ton of research to make sure everything looks like it does, I guess.
A lot of indie games like doing crossovers into other games, cameos, that sort of thing. Is that something you're open to for Cuphead?
Of other games in Cuphead or Cuphead in other games?
Cuphead in other games.
I think we're open to certain things. Like there's a few like really pie in the sky ideas, but it's tricky, right? Because once we start merchandise and you have a licensing agency, there's a bunch of different things that come into that.
Yeah, the rules get complicated and we don't like rules, and so we're like, we maybe just won't get ourselves in trouble by doing things like that.
Another reader wanted to know, and you touched on this a little bit, but what went into just setting up your team and forming a studio, like, quote unquote studio? I know you're remote, but.
Yeah, that's a good question. So for those of you who may not know, we don't have a head office. Chad and I are based out of the GTA here, but everyone throughout the team is spread across North America, from California to BC, Ottawa, and for a lot of our animators, 2D animation, especially on drawing on paper with pencil, is a dying art form. And so we had to go far and wide to find animators, from Google searches to looking at people's like Tumblrs and any social media where they'd post some of their work. So that's kind of how we found our animators. Programmers, similarly, through different forums.
Yeah, I think it was mainly like Google when we needed to find people and then dive deeper into their whatever they had. So for animators, they'd have like a Vimeo demo reel or a YouTube demo reel, and just looking at their life drawing and work and just judging it entirely based on that, and then having a chat with that person. And I don't know how, but I think we might have missed like 2 people didn't work out of when we did our searches, but the rest was like first crack is the person landed on a team and worked out perfectly.
Yeah, we want to sound professional and be like, we hired a hiring agency, and no, we Googled people and then like called them. We're like, hey. Yeah, but it worked, and then we had an online project collaboration tool that was free to use at first, and then once we scaled up and needed more space, it's a really small fee per month. Basecamp, this is not an ad. and just
Yes, it is.
call us, shared files back and forth and things like that. And yeah, we'd have kind of not as many as we should have, but monthly meetings or just conference calls where everyone would convene and we can kind of keep everyone in the loop in terms of talking to one another and not just us talking at people constantly. So it was interesting, it was fun, and we're going to keep doing it this way.
Do you see the team getting bigger or changing at all for the next game?
Well, from the few talks we've had of what our future projects look like, I think we're going to have to for sure. Like, if we want to push it even just a little bit beyond Cuphead, it'll be like a 6-year development process if we keep with the same small team.
Yeah.
So we'll have to scale up. It won't be something crazy because we like the idea of everybody kind of having their hand in everything and seeing everything without you siloing different teams and, people only talk a little bit. And even for Jared and I to like oversee the game, it gets out of hand when you start getting a massive
They're control
company.
freaks,
We are
and
control
they need
freaks.
to touch everything.
No, but we are control freaks, but it
For a reason,
for
though.
a reason.
I mean,
It's like
it shows.
Design by committee works in a lot of projects, but if you want to get like a love letter to games or something that is like deep in your soul, you kind of have to be a freak about all the details.
So our last community question is, someone just simply said, talk a bit about the music, and Jordan and I were wondering if we should include this question, and then Jordan said he really liked the intro song, and then I started singing the intro song, and then he started singing it with me.
Yeah.
And the music's really neat. And can you just kind of elaborate on that process a little bit?
The music is awesome, and I'm not being biased because it's obviously our game, but so it's a childhood friend who has played music his entire life, Christopher Madigan, and he is obviously a savant of some sort. He's never composed anything before, and we lured him in. Actually, you tell this story. It's pretty funny.
Well, this is back in late 2014. We said when Cuphead was only going to be an 8 to maybe 10 boss rush style game where you wouldn't have a world map, it was just going to be a selection screen like Mega Man, and it was going to be much more simple. We said, hey, we need like 8, maybe 10 tracks for the whole game. And he was like, you know what, I can do this on the side. And as he started getting deeper into it, we kept scaling the project up, and he accepted it at each step. But looking back on it, he's like, my God.
How did you do this to
He
me?
wouldn't have agreed to it.
No,
He just
he wouldn't
dumped
have.
this on him. Yeah. But
it wasn't intentional, though. We didn't know.
Because I don't know if we're hitting the most, but we're close. We're either the most or close to the most of having live recorded music in a video game, like actual, like almost 3 hours. It's crazier than movie soundtracks. They only, like the large ones, and hit an hour and a half or an hour and 45. So the fact that he composed nearly 3 hours during the course of this development, it's insane.
Yeah, it was recorded live in a studio here in Toronto with a nearly 40-piece ensemble. So we got to attend a couple of the sessions, and all of them are brilliant geniuses.
And back to your title screen question, that's just Chris really nerding out for music. He talked to the barbershop quartet that we hired for the game. They gave him some places to look for original books of how to compose proper quartet stuff. So he like dove really deep in that to make sure it was like
I mean, it's
perfect.
it's authentic sounding, at least to me.
Yeah, that
in
was his
person.
goal. So yeah, it turned out beautiful.
All right, I think we have some time for questions if you guys have any.
We will have someone with a mic coming up.
I think there's a process.
Looks like we got some good questions.
You're not allowed to ask a question, the man in the back. My cousin.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is it for you to port Cuphead to Switch?
That's a scale of we're lifetime exclusive on Xbox One.
Thank you.
You said you watched up to 2 hours of, at most 2 hours of cartoons a day. Which of the classic animators would you say is most inspirational to you? Who is your favorite?
Probably Grim Natwick. All of his early stuff, even some of his uncredited works, was very maniacal, and you could tell that during that era they were like almost rushed to get stuff out. But the style and the ideas that he came up with during those eras, and I mean, he co-created Betty Boop and all of the craziness. So that's definitely one of my all-time favorite.
I love Milt. Milt Call. Gotcha.
How many character designs did you go through?
To reach Cuphead,
Yeah.
as a decent guess, probably 300 or 400.
Yeah.
And it was a not easy, but a simple process. We knew what kind of body we wanted for the character, so I just sketched out the body of the character we wanted, and then I put 15 of those bodies on a page and printed out like a stack like this, and then just drew different heads. And every day I would just come in and just keep drawing, and we'd look through them, and eventually we landed on the cup for a head one.
Yeah, and we always got a lot closer to the final character sprite when Chad went kind of off the cuff. It would be like, these are all looking bad, I'm getting crazy, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and he would whip off this like really like, look at this funny idea, and we're like, oh, there's something there. So it always comes when you're least expecting it.
When did you land on the name Cuphead? Was there a moment, or did it just like appear to you, or how did you get that?
I think I chose that as like a super easy name that is like very basic, but at the same time described the character perfectly. And initially, I think a lot of us on the team were like, that's a good prototype name, we'll worry about it later. But as we kept using it, and you know, we used the name just in internal art, like put it on a few things like a title screen mock-up or what have you, it seemed right. So we
It
kept
stuck.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? How about right here? Yeah.
Gotta get that back guy.
I was just curious, before actually doing your 10 prototypes, where did you gain the experience you needed to actually start working on those? Or what background gave you the skills you needed to actually begin the pre-process process?
The truth of that is playing way too many video games when we were younger. Jared was working for our family construction business, even right up until we decided to go full time. Before this, I ran a web design and marketing company, so some of the skills are transferable, like Photoshop and Illustrator or whatever else we kind of needed for concepting. But the majority of how to make a game and why stuff plays correctly, we had zero formal training. It was just a bunch of. It got to the point when we were in our teen years that we could do 5 or 6 hours a day of games just for fun, but at the same time we'd be sitting around talking about and picking apart games. We didn't just play video games and say, hey, that was fun, see you later. We'd pick up at games, we'd wonder why like the collision detection was so horrible or really good, and why it was really good, and like really hone in on those areas. So definitely self-taught on too many hours of video games.
How about right there with the camera? Yeah.
Thank you. So you guys have been talking a lot about the process. What I'm more interested in is how the actual graphics work, because I'm trying to think of it in my head. You think of like an old school game like Contra, pixels. You think of like a newer game like, you know, they use like 3D models and stuff. How does it actually work? How did you get it to look the 30s style and feel like a game that would have been out in the 30s at that point, for example? Like, how'd you do it?
So a lot of that, in terms of the visual style for different bosses and characters and things like that, comes purely from watching these cartoons over and over and like studying, the rubber hosing and the creativity in terms of how an object will transition from something into something, like a man would transition into a fork and then walk over and pull off the tail from a cat and turn it into a match. Like the craziest, zaniest things those inspirations came from the cartoons themselves, and having just watched them while we were growing up, watched them through this educational period. And then when we were actually putting pencil to paper, there were no boundaries. It was just, here's what we want. We're thinking a genie, go as crazy as you possibly can. We'd come back with multiple different concepts. Chad and Jared would go through and say, 1, 7, and 12, I'll fix this and this, and then we would kind of really zero in on exactly what the genie is going to look like. Then it gets into the animation phase, where our animators would animate on keyframes just to make sure that what they're doing and their action aligns with what Chad and Jared are envisioning for that boss. Once that's approved, we go back and animate on the in-betweens. After that's all tied down, cleaned up, it then gets all inked on paper as well. That gets scanned in, and then some post-production on the art starts happening, so we delete all the white around the rest of the paper. Everything gets aligned using registration marks. It gets charted in terms of if there's looping or things like that in the animation, and then it gets inserted into the actual code. Did I miss something?
No, I think the summary of that is it's hand-drawn and hand-inked, and then once it's scanned and colored, it's just saved as a PNG. So there's no skeleton system, there's no fancy animation like systems on top of what we do. We just save a ton of images almost exactly like they do it back in the 1930s. Exactly. They technically are sprites, they're just higher res hand-drawn sprites. Yep.
Good answer, by the way. Good answer.
Let's get that
like to
guy in the
talk a
back
lot.
with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
glasses.
do it.
Way back, that weird-looking guy.
Hi, Dad.
Thanks. Maya, you're great, and your husband Chet is awesome. Chet. My question was, I'm old, so I know about some of your references.
We know that.
Like, thank you, Walter Lands, and some of the animators that you followed. You talked about working in a vacuum with this. As a developer, you don't get any market feedback. You get people that will tell you you're doing the right thing, but at what point do you know that what you like and what you believe in is something that's going to resonate with the public? When was it for you guys? Was it E3 or was it somewhere where you went, we do have an audience for this? Because everybody here likes what we like, but we don't know that the rest of the world likes it. What was that moment for you guys with the game?
It was so many different moments along the way, but I do think the biggest one was E3 2015.
For sure.
Where we were just gobsmacked over the response. Like, I still can't articulate it, how that felt, because we literally thought we would have, if I would tell you what we thought our lifetime sales goals were, it's like in this room. So.
And what is the sales at this point? Like roughly, it's millions, right?
Roughly, yeah, 2.5 million.
2.5 million, yeah. So crazy impressive.
No, it's insane.
Units.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, I would.
But that's definitely the answer. The 2015 E3 was like the shocker moment for us, and that's when we realized that it was our little passion project could be seen by a bunch of other people. And I'll loop back to lessons for other developers out there. I forgot to include that since I'm a heavy, my job is just visuals for the most part, I'm a firm believer that you have to find an original, and not 100% original, but an original art style for your game to stand out. This medium is like almost entirely visual. So if you start with something that other people might see as a clone of some other game, even if it's the best game you ever made, it's going to be passed by people. So even though it's very hard to land on a semi-original art style, it's something that every developer should strive for.
Thank you. So obviously a great marketing tool to sell a game is making an amazing game like this one. You mentioned that you're working in marketing. My question is, when you're trying to get this game out to the public, when you want people to see it, what's that process like as a small team? Obviously, the marketing budget probably isn't very large.
Zero.
So, yeah.
Zero. So yeah, we actually had $0 for marketing and PR and things like that. This is really where our partnership with Microsoft came to bat for us. We had never even previously discussed it, but it was 3 months, I think, before launch when they sent us an email and they were like, hey, we want to get on a call to talk about your marketing plan and versus what our marketing plan is and make sure that we align. And I tried to play it cool. And I was like, yeah, sure, how about Wednesday at 2? And then I hit send and I turned to Chad and I was like, oh my God, like we need to hire an agency like now, blah, blah, blah. They think we have this plan. So we engaged with an agency out of Vancouver and had a reality check in terms of how much that costs. And we're like, okay, no, we'll just come clean and tell them we have nothing. So I get on the call and you clear your throat and you're like, we plan to put out some tweets. And luckily they were just like, amen, sister, let us do that for you, let us help you with that. And they invested a ton of money in terms of marketing this thing at different events and getting messages from our cousins in the States or something being like, oh, I just saw a snap of Cuphead during I think it was like a Super Bowl commercial or something like that. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea. Like,
But this actually ties back into the first question. There's a reason why we went exclusive with Microsoft from the beginning, because it brings all these opportunities, being at the trade shows and things like that we didn't have to cough up out of pocket aside from travel and food expense.
And just the experience level. Take the monetary, perspective out of it. We
know nothing.
We know a little bit more now. No, we still know nothing. We had no idea which conventions, which summits, which conferences to go to, or how to even get a booth and blah, blah, blah. They brought such a wealth of knowledge to the table during every one of our weekly calls that it was just invaluable. You can't really put a price tag to stuff like that. So my advice would probably be to, when you're talking to different companies, like if you're talking to Sony or you're talking to Microsoft or whoever, don't just look at a dollar amount or the surface things. Think a little bit deeper in terms of what their experience is and how they can help you. Ooh, that just opened up some more questions.
Yeah.
I think we're on our last question here. I guess right next to you, that guy kind of in the middle. Yeah, right to your right.
So, there was a little bit of discussion about the music, but one thing I'm actually really curious about is how exactly did you work on the design for the sound effects? And the voice acting
luckily
as well?
we partnered with Sweet Justice out of the UK for the sound. Initially, if you go back and look at some trailers, it's actually all of Jared making the sound effects.
Yeah, sitting at his desk being like, pow, pow, pow.
Yeah, with a $30 microphone making the sound effects. And as the game got bigger and got more response, we started talking to Sweet Justice, and they're like, listen, they've done lots of cool AAA games, but they've never done a cartoon or like a crazy creative game, and they really wanted to. So they did a few tests, and it was amazing. And then we let them take that entirely over, and we just stood back as they made all the amazing sounds.
Yeah. I think we just made time for just one more question, just in the hallway here. Yep, you're just in the middle, the little guy right here. Yeah, you.
Why did you make Mugman have a fat nose and Cuphead have a thin nose?
That was entirely a design decision because Cuphead was designed first, and he had the small nose and the hook straw. And when we wanted to make a Player 2 that looked similar but not exact, we just played around with a few different ideas, cut the straw off at the hook part, and there was a heavy influence on, if you look at early Bimbo designs, like from the Betty Boop era, he used to have a massive nose, and there's a few freeze frames that I stored, like I saved on my computer that I kept going back to because I really liked the look of that character. And that's one of the major reasons why we dropped the larger nose on him.
I'm glad we saved the last question.
And some people know this, they're red and blue because of Contra.
Oh. All right, guys, I think we have to give up the room. Thanks for coming to the panel, meeting us, and
Thank
thanks
you
for
guys
coming
so
to
much.
HLX.
Jared said to talk. I was the one with the speedrunner? Yeah. Honestly, I'm a little glad you guys missed the one.